Good morning, guys. I am down in the garden today doing some spring prep. There are lots of things to get done down here. I'm starting a little bit earlier than I typically do. We're in beginning to middle of February right now, and I'm just trying to get everything done that I can just to streamline my process. I've really been enjoying those slow winter days up at the house, and I've just decided I need to get myself moving again. So I came down here. I need to get some weeding done. I need to amend some of my beds, and I have a big dilemma on my hands. And I'm going to show you guys what I am talking about. So you can see in this in-ground garden, I have this nice green crop growing here. And I also have it in some of my raised beds, as well as all of my containers and my medicinal herb garden. And this is a cover crop. This is a pea and oat cover crop. And what this does for me is it adds nitrogen back into my soil, and it also produces a really good amount of organic matter to put back into the soil for when I plant in the spring. So that's the reason why I did my cover crops over the winter, just to improve my soil and add some nutrients back in. But the problem is that pea and oats typically will winter kill in my region. Now over here, in row number 1, this row I planted out September 1st, and the foliage and the plants got really big, and then as soon as we got our first real freeze, that went ahead and winter killed. But these other rows, as well as a lot of my raised beds and my containers, these ones I planted out in October. So these guys were still really small when we got that freeze, and for some reason they completely tolerated it. And so now they've overwintered. So I have to make the decision of what I am going to do with these things. So here is a pea plant that I just pulled up from my raised bed. How these plants put nutrients back into my soil is because they take nitrogen from the atmosphere and put it into their root system. Now you can see all these little nodules on there. They look like little hearts. Those are all nitrogen in there. Now, if I let the pea plant go to flower, all of this nitrogen would be taken up by the flowering and fruiting process, but I don't want that. So I want to kill this crop before the spring comes, before it has time to flower, and I want to leave the roots in the ground so that they will put the nitrogen back into my soil. Because if I rip all this up and take it out, then I'm taking out all of those nutrients as well as all of this organic matter. So I'm kind of in a little bit of a conundrum of how I'm going to go ahead and kill these things off. So there's a couple of ways that you can kill cover crops. The first is that I could just come with some Roundup or glycophosphate or 2,4-D or any type of herbicide that's going to kill this type of plant, and I could just spray it and I'd be done. Yay, really easy. However, I don't want to kill anything in my soil with all of those chemicals. I don't want to kill my earthworms or any of my beneficial, microbial things that are in my ground. And I also don't want to poison us, because we're eating out of this garden. So that's not going to be an option for me. The next thing that I could do would be to rip them all out. Okay, so I could rip them all out and throw them in my compost, but then I wouldn't be getting the organic matter from this green mass, and I would not be getting the nitrogen from those little nodules on the roots. So that's not an option either. The next thing that I could do would be to till it all in. And I'm not against tilling, but I have a lot of irrigation here. If what they say is true about no-till gardening, how it keeps sort of all of your microbes and their habitat intact by not tilling the soil, then I don't want to take that chance either. These things are really not tall enough for me to crimp over, which basically just means kind of taking a board and going down and walking and crimping them over, and it basically kind of cuts off the stem from the top of the plant. They're probably not at the right stage for that either, so that's not going to work. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to actually get my weed whacker, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to weed whack these things as close as I can to the ground, and I want to leave all this organic matter right on top of the roots that are left in the ground here. And I am going to see if that works to kill these things off. I am hoping that it does. In addition to that, today I also have to get compost into a lot of my beds. I found a fantastic source for compost this year. I did not make enough of it, and my compost really isn't ready yet. I have a lot of weed seeds in there that are not ready to be thrown on the garden yet because they'll just make a huge weedy mess for me. But this compost that I found is beautiful. So this is the compost that we found this year. It is made with all hardwood mulch. A gentleman just brings hardwood mulch onto his property, and he goes ahead and it takes him a year, and he's able to break it down into this beautiful, beautiful compost. So we are really excited to put that in the garden this year. I'm hoping to put a 2-inch layer on all of my garden. I only got 15 cubic yards from him, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that. But some of my beds are currently taken up with garlic and things like that, so I don't have to amend those, so we might just make it. So the first thing that I'm doing here is just simply removing my irrigation. The plants have kind of grown up and around it, and so I'm having to detach the plants from it and sort of just move it to the side. I'm also taking just a little bit of the wood chips and kind of getting those off of the beds if they are overlapping onto the crop. And then I'm using my weed whacker just to get as low as I can. As I'm doing this, it's kind of getting a lot of the plant matter into my wood chip walkways, and I'll have to deal with that later. But if you guys have ever considered or investigated cover crops for your garden for improving your soil, I think that they are probably one of the best things that you can do, and probably one of the most underused techniques in our modern world today in gardening. But the problem with cover crops is killing them. And so by going with the pea and oat mix, I thought I was safe from that this year, but apparently I was not. And so we're gonna see if this kills them off. I really hope that it does. If it doesn't, there are a few other options that I could do. Like I said before, I could till it in. You can also take one of those torch weeders and burn it. That's another option. Or I could try to lay a tarp over it. Now, I don't have a silage tarp or a solarization tarp, and they are very expensive. The blue tarps that you would get at Lowe's or Home Depot, they really don't work for this application. You really need those silage tarps to get this job done, to kill that crop off. So we're just gonna kind of see what we can do. I'm thinking that the flame burner may be my next option. Nate was nice enough to come down to the garden and do the raised beds for me, and then he went up to my medicinal herb garden and took care of this. Now, I'm not going to say anything. He is compacting my soil, and I'm kind of cringing as I'm filming this here, but I'm not going to say anything to him because honestly that weed whacker was getting really heavy, and I am glad that he took it on for me. Greenlee grabbed just a few of the pea and oat clippings, and she's going to bring them over to the chickens. When we let the chickens out to free range, they love to come in this garden and just eat this, and so do the cats, and so does the dog, and it's kind of odd, but they all just love to nibble on this fodder. Once that was done, I got to getting some compost to move it into the garden. Now, it's kind of in the back right corner of the garden, and I have a fence around it, so I have to go all the way around the garden with my wheelbarrow. But honestly, all of those long winter days up at the house, I've been a little bit lazy and a bit out of shape, so it's actually some pretty good workout for me. And so, like I said earlier, we're going to put about 1 to 2 inches on each bed, and that really should be sufficient to give me a really good start into the growing season this year. Now, because we did bring this compost into the property this year and have to pay for it, Nate was really intrigued by the way that this gentleman makes his hardwood mulch. So he has decided that he is going to get on the tractor every week and turn all of our mulch piles and see if he can make hardwood mulch on the property for us. And you can see here, these piles have been sitting for about 6 months, and you can see that they are already starting to break down. So here we are about 5 days later after we weed whacked those cover crops, and it looks as though the oats are coming back. The peas don't seem to be growing, but the oats definitely are. So my initial thought was to get a torch weeder and just burn the tops of the plants and to see if that would kill them. However, I went online and I was able to find a clear plastic tarp at Lowe's. Now, this is not your typical solarization tarp that you would use in an agricultural setting. This is literally just a clear plastic drop cloth. It's about 4 millimeters thick. It's actually pretty heavy duty. It's probably not UV treated, meaning that it probably won't hold up season after season, but I thought I would give it a try. I thought that this would be easier than doing the torch weeder, and if this works for me, then I'll have a really good idea of what I can do in the future if my cover crops do not die. So you can see we've just gone ahead and rolled out this piece of plastic. It's 10 feet wide by 100 feet long. So this will take care of 2 rows at a time. And these 2 rows that we're covering were really the main 2 rows that I was concerned of. I do have some cover crops in a few of my other rows, but they're mostly just at the beginning and end of those rows. So I wanted to start with these. And my thought is that we will let this sit on top of these rows for 2 to 4 weeks. And I'll kind of come down and check on them every once in a while to see how they are progressing.